Hello, friends. It's been a while since I've read from this book, Japanese Studies in Britain, A Survey and History, um, by Kortatsi and Kornitsky, edited by Hugh Kortatsi and Peter Kornitsky. Um, I have a playlist to which I will add this video. Anyway, yesterday I received permission from Stephen McENALLY to read his chapter. So I shall share from the book uh, right away. So here we are. Um, okay, so the title of this chapter is The Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation, Japanese Studies Funding and Policy, 1985 to 2016. Author Stephen McENALLY. Um, sorry. And he appears in other points in the book. So let's take a quick look. Special thanks are due to the Japan Society and to the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation for sponsoring the publication of this book, and to Stephen McENALLY for his help and advice during the development of this project. And he was the British Council's regional director in Kyoto between 1979 and 1982. After serving in a variety of council posts at home and overseas, he moved to the Japan Foundation, London, with a particular remit for its Japanese studies work. He was chief executive of the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation from 2006 until 2016. Okay, and there we are. That's the chapter itself. Okay, so without further ado, I shall start reading. Get these things out of the way. Okay, so the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation, Japanese Studies Funding and Policy, 1985 to 2016, with permission from Stephen McENALLY, the author. The Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation was founded in 1985 following an initial endowment of 3,000 million yen, or is that 3 billion yen, 9.5 million pounds, from the Japan Shipbuilding Industry Foundation, now called the Nippon Foundation. The objective was to create an exclusively grant-giving body that could offer financial support towards joint projects and initiatives that would advance the education of the people of both nations in each culture's society, in each other's culture, society, and achievements, and so promote and maintain close relations between the United Kingdom and Japan. The endowment had, by the end of 2015, reached almost £26 million. Over the years, the Foundation has awarded almost 5,000 grants, totaling over £14 million, to projects and initiatives in all fields of Japan-related activity, ranging from arts, culture, and society to science, technology, and medicine, from the humanities to youth exchange and sport. Whilst emphases between activity fields have naturally shifted over the years, it is support for the study of Japan and its language that has remained a cornerstone of the Foundation's work. The inaugural press release, while describing a background in which more effort should be made in promoting mutual understanding between our two peoples, observed that the British people should have greater opportunities to learn about Japan. The Foundation's first annual report similarly referred to a need to encourage in various ways a greater understanding of Japan and its people. At a time of relative disparity in mutual understanding, with significantly less known in the UK about Japan than vice versa, these were unsurprising statements. Japan, after all, was a country of growing political and economic consequence both to the UK and to the world. By 1988, there was specific mention of emerging priorities. It is the teaching of Japanese in British universities, schools, and in adult education classes which has come to receive a significant measure of our support. Annual Report, 1988. And records of early trustees' meetings also begin to reveal a recurring concern among founding trustees that not enough was being done at the national level to promote Japan and Japanese studies, for governments seem to review the health of the field of Japanese studies only about every 20 years, and then only when forced to do so. Internal Meeting Note, 1987. A board minute of the same year points to a clear need in the national interest, italics added, for a deeper awareness in the UK of a country of increasing economic and strategic importance to the UK. There was considerable truth in both these observations, and the trustees were sensible of the generally held view that the study of Japan itself was of rather low priority to governments of the day. Indeed, Japanese studies had received only two waves of government attention and review: the 1961 Hayter Report on the teaching of Oriental, Slavonic, East European, and African studies, and the 1986 Parker Report. The Hayter Report had helped move the physical study of Japan to other parts of the country and away from Oriental studies at Oxford, Cambridge, and London. As a result, three northern centres were established: Asian Studies at Hull University, Chinese Studies at Leeds University, and Japanese Studies at Sheffield University. It had also helped to broaden the study of Japan from the humanities into the social sciences and to shift the study of Japan from the historical to the contemporary period. And of course, this was all in line with the government's view of the national interest in commerce and diplomacy. Trustees were particularly encouraged, however, by the publication of the Parker Report because it dwelt on the importance of the study of Japan. Written at a time of high economic growth in Japan, the report's principal recommendation that the UK should, in the national interest, devote more funds to promote the study of Japan came as little surprise. But were UK governments prepared to invest in the field? After all, it was in the 1980s that corporate funds had already started to flow into Japanese studies, which had resulted in the establishment of the Nissan Institute of Japanese Studies at Oxford University and the establishment of a chair of Japanese at Cambridge funded by the Keidan-ren. I think it's still funded by the Keidan-ren, if I'm not mistaken. The findings of the Parker Report, coming just 1 year after the Foundation's establishment, were timely and helped trustees focus upon how the Foundation might better support the field. For it was evident to all that, in spite of these few corporate benefactions, funding, UK or otherwise, was by no means secure. And although the Foundation had already awarded, albeit reactively, a large number of substantial grants to Japanese studies centres, two examples of which were to Newcastle University to support Japanese at its newly formed East Asia Centre, and to the Essex Centre for the study of contemporary Japan towards a specialist Japan library, trustees now began to recognise a need to take a more proactive role than hitherto. It was a question of not simply responding to the calls made upon us, although we shall never lack for good applications, but exploring what initiatives the Foundation should take to foster strong and permanent links between Japan and Britain, Annual Report 1986. And they wisely decided that a number of these initiatives should be in Japanese studies and the study of the language. A first step in late 1986 was to commission and fund a major survey by the School of Oriental and African Studies into the possibility of sending UK students of Japanese to Japan to study and work. It led to the setting up of a full program in 1988, again supported with considerable Foundation funding. Other targeted initiatives followed sporadically, it has to be said. One major initiative in 1989, however, was a grant of £79,000 over 3 years awarded to Sheffield University to construct a national database for Japanese studies in the UK. Another hugely significant initiative in 1994 was to commission and fully fund £20,000 in cooperation with the Japan Studies Working Group of the UK Japan 2000 Group, the first detailed UK survey of the state of the teaching of Japanese at tertiary level, a survey that has subsequently been updated regularly, culminating in the most recent 2016 report compiled by the Japan Foundation. Over the decade that followed, however, the vision of proactive and targeted initiatives was rapidly overtaken by a need to respond to an ever-increasing stream of applications from universities seeking often core funding, merely to keep Japanese studies alive, as the effect of reduced government funding was beginning severely to pinch. At this point in 1991, the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation stepped in with support for a number of university lectureship posts, followed by a second smaller program in 1994. But with limited recurrent resources, the foundation itself was unable to make a similar commitment. It nonetheless continued to award often significant grants to the sector in 5 principal areas. The Foundation's 1988 annual report had noted the assistance given to British universities to enable students to travel to Japan for training in the language, and this area, the undergraduate year abroad and summer schools, became a principal target for substantial and recurrent funding well into the early 1990s. A grant in 1986 of £19,000, for example, was given to Sheffield University towards Japanese summer schools for students at Cambridge, London, Oxford, and Sheffield. And in 1988, £12,500 was awarded to SOAS for a course in Japan to provide language training, homestay, and business experience. In 1991, three scholarships totaling £15,000 were awarded to the Northwest Centre for Japanese Studies for study in Japan, and regular grants for similar amounts were made annually to other institutions across the sector. A second area was support for the teaching of the Japanese language at secondary school level. It is recognized that if better advantage is to be taken of what the universities have to offer in the teaching of Japanese studies and the Japanese language, greater attention must be given to study at secondary level. Annual Report 1988. This was the first indication of a desire to do more to nurture the successor generation. As a result, a large number of grants were made to schools, mainly for new teaching materials and for exchange visits. In 1988, for example, £20,000 was invested in the construction of a 3-year Japanese language course at Hiroshima University for UK secondary school teachers, and in 1990, £18,000 was granted to the University of Wales for the training of Japanese language teachers in Welsh schools. A further grant of £20,000 was awarded to Tavistock College, Devon, to provide additional staffing to enable expansion of its language teaching provision. A further important opportunity for the Foundation to make a difference at this level arose during the mid-1990s at a time when a number of UK secondary schools were seeking language college status and were beginning the teaching of Japanese. During this period, the Foundation awarded over £75,000 to 12 schools. In retrospect, an excellent investment, as most are still teaching Japanese to this day. I hope that's still true. This is 10 years later after this was written. The third broad area of Foundation support was to the non-academic professional bodies involved in the promotion of Japanese studies and the teaching of the language. The Foundation was pioneering, for example, in supporting the fledgling British Association for Japanese Studies when in 1988 it was granted £96,500 to set up and maintain an institute to provide intensive Japanese training for university students and staff, secondary school teachers, and company staff during doing business with Japan. It gave £14,000 to the 1991 Japan Festival towards the general support of Japanese teaching in the UK, and £10,000 to the Japan Festival Education Trust for a Discovering Japan exhibition, a touring resource for secondary schools. In 1992, the National Education Resources Information Service was awarded £20,000 to establish a database of Japanese teaching resources for schools and higher education centres. Regular financial support to the activities of the Japan Foundation London Language Centre and to the British Association for the Teaching of Japanese continues. The fourth area, support for publications / materials and Japan-related resources, has always been a key one for the Foundation, and over the years it has provided financial subsidies towards the publication of over 100 works on Japan in a wide range of fields, and has consistently financed moves in the universities to coordinate and simplify national access to for the separate holdings of material relating to Japanese studies. The fifth principal area was support for posts. In spite of the Foundation's inability to launch anything to match Daiwa's 1991 and 1994 post initiatives, it was nonetheless able to fund and or co-fund a number of new lectureships. 1990, a lecturer of Japanese in a Welsh secondary school, £22,500. 1991, Durham University, visiting Japanese teacher of Japanese, £15,000. 1992, Sheffield University, language resources officer, £20,000. 1995, Birkbeck College, Japanese history lectureship, £25,000. 1998, Oxford Brookes University lectureship in Japanese studies, £18,000, and University College London lectureship in Japanese archaeology, £10,000. By 1996, just 10 years after its establishment, approximately 25% of the Foundation's £6 million total grant expenditure had been devoted to Japanese studies and language support. Yet for all the resources that the Foundation had awarded to the field, with the exception of those few targeted initiatives described above, most of its grants continued to be scattergun and ad hoc, as an internal board minute of the time described them. What the foundation lacked was the means to initiate a program that could inject serious funding into the field, one that would have impact and provide a firmer foundation for potential development. The late 1990s and early 2000s continued to witness further deterioration in the health of the Japanese studies field as a number of centers and university departments began to retrench, some closing entirely. Victims were Sussex University, the University of Essex Contemporary Japan Centre, the Birmingham University Japan Centre, and the Scottish Centre for Japanese Studies at Stirling University. But the closure of the East Asian Studies Department at the University of Durham in 2003 was a critical turning point. Durham at the time was training some 20% of all East Asian Studies undergraduates in the UK and was one of the bastions of Japanese studies. It was evident to trustees that these retrenchments and closures were not due to a falling demand for Japanese, nor to decreasing undergraduate applications. Indeed, a Japan Foundation survey at the time showed that nearly 10,000 secondary school students were taking Japanese language courses, and demand for university places was growing rapidly. UCAS statistics had revealed a huge 40.9% increase in 2006 in the number of applications to Japanese degree courses, and numbers applying to study Japanese as the sole or main focus of their undergraduate degree had been rising steadily year on year, with 532 applications in 2002, rising to 744 in 2004 and to 1,126 in 2006. This trend, moreover, had been visible for at least a decade before that. In short, universities willing to support full single and joint honours undergraduate degrees were shrinking to leave a mere handful struggling to meet the demand. At the time, only 7 universities offered single honours degrees in Japanese studies, with a further 9 providing postgraduate courses that included elements of Japanese studies. The decline in provision had happened, therefore, despite growing interest and a concomitant demand for courses. What was clear was the need for the UK to maintain an adequate provision of degree programmes to serve both the rising interest and the requirements of the employers. Evidence had also shown that graduates in Japanese were very much in demand in the job market, with a respectable number of graduates in Japanese studies moving into Japan-related work and contributing to the promotion of British interests in various ways. Students coming to the UK from overseas to pursue higher degrees in Japanese studies were also on the increase and making a significant economic contribution. By 2006, the third and most recent government review had just taken place, with an expansion of East Asian studies resulting from the Language and Area Studies Initiative, under which 5 international centres of excellence, jointly funded by the HEFCA, ESRC and HRC, had been created. 2 of these centres focused on East Asia. The first was the White Rose East Asia Centre, WREAC, comprising the National Institute of Japanese Studies, NIJS, and the National Institute of Chinese Studies, a joint initiative by Leeds University and Sheffield University, and which combined the study of Japan and China. The second was the British Inter-University China Centre, BICC, a collaboration between the universities of Oxford, Bristol, and Manchester that focused exclusively on China. The NIJS was the only centre to have received funding for Japanese studies under this new initiative, and therefore the only designated international centre of excellence on Japan in the UK. On the one hand, foundation trustees were encouraged to see that the university funding agencies, for all the concentration on China, were including Japan, still by some considerable distance the world's second largest economy, as one of the areas of key strategic importance, and that it was to be given a funding boost. I think it has since been overtaken by China, but I'm not sure about it. I believe so. On the other hand, the results of the initiative posed 2 further challenges for Japanese studies nationally, and the Foundation was quick to identify them. The first was that all other UK universities teaching Japanese were to receive no government funding at all for their teaching and research. The second was that only half of one of the 5 new centres of excellence, the NIJS within the White Rose East Asia Centre, had a specifically Japan-related remit. It was important, therefore, to devise a funding mechanism that might help boost funding for Japanese studies to the kind of level that could have been envisaged had the HEFCA initiative resulted in a discrete Japan Centre of Excellence, whilst at the same time ensuring that other UK centres or departments of Japanese also benefited from increased funding. Trustees saw this as an opportunity. Concerns were already being raised more widely about the longer-term sustainability of these multidisciplinary centres once the 5-year HEFKE funding expired. Were additional funding to be made available to the NIJS, there would be a firmer base upon which UK-Japanese studies could be sustained. And if at the same time funding could also be obtained to support Japanese studies at other UK universities, then the foundation could make a real difference. Fortunately, the Nippon Foundation, the foundation's initial benefactor, was itself looking to widen the scope of its grant-making activities and to expand its international programs into higher education. It shared the foundation's concerns and stepped boldly into the breach. Minutes of the foundation's 2006 annual general meeting, attended by representatives from the Nippon Foundation, reveal a detailed discussion similar to the one in 1986 on the importance of the national interest. Trustees talked of the potential far-reaching repercussions for relations between our two countries that the Japanese studies funding crisis could wreak if not properly addressed. The UK was losing its national pool of Japan specialists at an alarming rate, experts who had been instrumental in fostering and sustaining the close partnership that the UK and Japan had enjoyed in trade and investment, cultural and scientific exchange, and in a number of multilateral contexts. The meeting regretted that for what appeared purely financial reasons, the study of Japan was no longer important, and that Japanese was becoming a vulnerable subject merely because it was expensive to teach. Japanese was being cut back in favour of subjects that brought in more revenue, and the government mantra remained constant and at arm's length. Decisions of this nature had to remain the preserve of the universities themselves, and complete autonomy in the decision-making process had to be honoured. The meeting also regretted the declining number of mid-career academics as more UK scholars were seeking research opportunities and work overseas. Not only were we losing our pool of experts, but we are also passing up the opportunity to encourage the next generation of such experts to take its place. Something had to be done. Both foundations quickly agreed that the area of greatest need was support for new lectureships. Grants would be made available to universities to cover the direct salary costs and would run for a full 5 years. This would make it easier for universities to appoint on indefinite contracts, help the posts to become established, and at least in theory, make it more difficult for universities to discontinue them after the funding ceased. The idea of endowing 1 or 2 lectureships only was never an option. For if the programme was to have national impact, the funding eggs needed to be placed into many baskets. The programme was announced by both foundations at a press conference at the Embassy of Japan in September 2007 as a joint partnership. The Nippon Foundation would fund the programme and the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation would administer it. It would place £2.5 million into the establishment of the posts in order to help maintain that vital pool of expertise and sensitive understanding that is essential for the continuing health of the British-Japanese relationship. It was to be the biggest leap forward in the history of the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation and one of the largest injections of recurrent external funding that the discipline has ever received. It was designed to target the study and research of contemporary Japan, primarily in the social sciences. It was hoped that the posts created would not only strengthen the UK's teaching and research capacity, but also broaden the range of options on offer within current Japanese studies programs. They would also facilitate the establishment of new courses and, importantly, they would cross-fertilize into discipline departments to include Japan-related courses in other faculties. All appointments would be with younger lecturers in mind, the next generation of Japan experts. Spread of subject field and width of geographical coverage was pleasing. The 13 posts at 12 universities nationwide ranged from Japanese political history and economics to science policy, from the economic anthropology of Japan to Japanese visual media, and from the sociology of Japan to the Japanese creative industries, cultural policy, and contemporary visual cultures. A particularly welcome placement was in the area of science and technology policy at Cambridge University, and Newcastle University chose to place the appointment in the Department of History. The foundation would have welcomed an application from Scotland, but Japanese studies at Stirling had ceased. Glasgow had poor provision, and Edinburgh's department had become small, and Japanese studies had all but disappeared in Northern Ireland. The posts created were as follows: Birkbeck College, University of London, Department of Media and Cultural Studies, Research and Teaching Associate in Japanese Creative Industry Studies. University of Bristol, School of Sociology, Politics and International Studies, Lectureship in Contemporary Japanese Studies. University of Cambridge, Faculty of Middle East and Asian Studies. Needham Research Institute, Research and Teaching Associate in Japanese Science and Technology. Cardiff University, Cardiff Japanese Studies Centre, Lectureship in Japanese Studies. University of Leeds, National Institute of Japanese Studies, Lectureship in Japanese Studies. University of Sheffield, National Institute of Japanese Studies. 1. Lectureship in Japan's Economy and Management. 2. Lectureship in Japanese Studies. University of Manchester, School of Languages, Linguistics and Cultures, Lectureship in Japanese Visual Cultures. University of Newcastle, School of Historical Studies, Lectureship in Modern Japanese History. University of Oxford, Department of Sociology, School of Interdisciplinary Area Studies, Career Development, Fellowship in the Sociology of Japanese Society. Oxford Brookes University, Department of Anthropology and Geography, Lectureship in the Anthropology of Japan. University of London, School of Oriental and African Studies, Department of History, Lectureship in the History of Contemporary Japan. University of East Anglia, Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Sainsbury Institute for the Study of Japanese Arts and Cultures, Lectureship in Contemporary Japanese Visual Media. Yes, I'm interested to see University of Newcastle there because a member of the Sato family, at least his family name is Sato, is now at Newcastle, and I think he's doing a little bit of Japanese studies there. At least that's my understanding. With additional funding from the Nippon Foundation for outreach activities, the foundation was also able to organize 2 international conferences at which the Sasakawa lecturers presented their research alongside leading UK specialists and invited speakers from Japan. The first, Japan Matters, Redefining Power, Politics and Culture in the Age of Globalization, was in 2009, and the second, Keeping Japan on the Map, was held in 2011, both attended by audiences of over 200. The program was completed in 2013. In an address at a reception at the Embassy of Japan, the Japanese ambassador commented that it was hard to think of another program related to Japanese studies in this country that has achieved its aims in such spectacular fashion. The lectureship at Birkbeck, for example, allowed Japanese to be studied from undergraduate level to PhD for the first time. The Bristol Post contributed significantly to the growing success of the Centre for East Asian Studies, and a new MSc degree programme with a major Japan component was created as a result. The Post at Cambridge was the first in the UK to specialise in the cultural and historical analysis of science, technology and medicine in Japan, and although it did not continue, the initial incumbent moved on to create a course based on her expertise in the field of science, technology and medicine at the University of Manchester. At Cardiff University's growing Japanese Studies Centre, the only centre in Wales to teach Japanese, the lectureship was instrumental in ensuring that Japanese continued at a time when the centre itself had been under threat of complete closure. The post at Leeds fulfilled one of the programme's principal objectives and became established there as one of the next generation of experts. Manchester's appointment was unique in being the first in the UK to specialise in and teach Japanese popular culture, a new area of interest and research. The Newcastle lectureship enabled students unlikely to have studied Japan during their university degrees to specialise in Japanese history and helped establish its first MA with a Japan component. The post's success led directly to staff expansion into the School of Modern Languages with the establishment of a Japan Foundation-funded permanent lectureship there. The Sheffield Post helped equip students, and potentially the next generation of experts on Japan, with the tools to analyse and understand Japan's economy and management, and help build and maintain long-term academic expertise for media representations and for briefings for policymakers. At Oxford, the appointment provided the means for further expansion in Japanese studies with the recruitment of a senior Japanese sociologist to a second post there, and the Japanese Studies programme at Oxford Brookes was able to strengthen greatly its expertise in the anthropology of Japan. At East Anglia, the lectureship fulfilled its objective in enabling the university to offer teaching in a new area, contemporary Japanese visual media, adding value to existing strengths in political, social and international studies and film and television studies. It was also the major catalyst and impetus in the university's decision to create a new centre for Japanese studies in 2011. Finally, at SOAS, the future of Japanese studies, history in particular, was far better secured as a result of a lectureship. The lectureship program had been conceived originally as having a studentship component, but for budgetary and other reasons, the Nippon Foundation had advised the foundation that this might form the basis of a future funding bid. In the meantime, the foundation had been providing much needed support, and this support continues today in the form of travel grants to doctoral students wishing to undertake fieldwork in Japan in a range of Japan-related disciplines. Although the lectureships had helped to create depth and had encouraged the teaching and research of new specialisms within the field, with the funding crisis still acute, now exacerbated by the new funding structure that had brought swinging increases in undergraduate fees, there was a renewed need to encourage study at master's and PhD level. Research Council postgraduate funding, moreover, which now designated East Asian studies as a whole with no separate category for Japan, was becoming increasingly difficult to secure. Trustees felt that the foundation was in a good position again to make a difference if it could offer a number of postgraduate studentships across the sector. Therefore, following a successful bid to the Nippon Foundation for renewed funding, totaling £1.5 million, the foundation succeeded in 2014 in launching the Sasakawa Japanese Studies postgraduate studentship program, and it is currently providing up to 30 postgraduate studentships annually over the period 2014 to 2019 to UK universities. Critical mass was again a major consideration in crafting the program. Rather than offering full fees plus maintenance studentships at some £25,000, it was decided that £10,000 units, which would more than cover tuition fees, would have the greatest impact. And it would make all the difference in attracting the greatest number of the brightest undergraduates to proceed to postgraduate study who might otherwise have been deterred for reasons of affordability. It was also decided that the studentships should be open to UK, EU, and overseas students. Universities would make their own selection for foundation approval. Now in its third year, the programme has supported students at the following universities: Birkbeck, Bristol, Durham, Cambridge, Cardiff, Edinburgh, LSE, King's College London, Leeds, Manchester, Newcastle, Oxford, Oxford Brookes, St Andrews, Sheffield, SOAS, UEA, University College London, Warwick, and York. It is clear that the Great Britain Sasakawa Foundation continues to play a valuable role in the promotion of Japanese studies in this country. Since its inception, it has contributed consistently and effectively to the field with grants to the secondary and higher education sector that in the last 10 years alone have amounted to some £4.5 million. But with a broader remit that extends into wider areas of Japan-related activity, the resources that it is able to commit to Japanese teaching, study and research will always be limited. It can only nibble at the edges of a deeper and more fundamental funding crisis. The necessity for a UK government strategy that can significantly increase and sustain core funding for Japanese studies, as recommended 30 years ago by the Parker Report, is as imperative today as it was then. I think that's the end. Yes, the next one is chapter 23 there. All right, so I shall stop the share. So it's quite interesting to read about these funding organizations, the Daiwa and the Sasakawa foundations, and to learn how Japanese studies has been nurtured over many years in the UK. Of course, the future is a little bit uncertain, so one can only hope that things will continue in the way that they have, and with possibly get better in the future. All right. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall stop here and see you again sometime in the future, perhaps reading from this same book or perhaps by William Adams material, which is a separate playlist on my channel. Thank you.